has been around for 4.5 billion years. Humans have only been around for about 300,000 of those years. And yet, in that short time, we've managed to do so much damage. Climate change is a very real issue affecting all of us. In recent years, this has become even more obvious with the drastic changes in weather. While generally people in more developed countries in the middle and upper class are feeling slight discomfort from the weird weather, people living in less developed countries have seen their homes destroyed and lives taken away by the damage that climate change has done. This is an issue of empathy. You are likely contributing to this issue, so you should care about those feeling the brunt of it. A large perpetrator of climate change is capitalism. Capitalism is a system that encourages overconsumption and wastefulness. It tells you that you should always be spending your money and buying new things. A major part of what is being consumed is food. The food system is contributing a large amount to climate change, but there are plenty of things that you as an individual can do about it. Agriculture has had an impact on the environment since the minute that humans first began planting crops in alternate, which was about 10,000 years ago. But the damage was not severe. Things only began to get bad during the Industrial Revolution. This was the beginning of the use of mechanization. The machine made it a lot easier to produce more food at a faster rate. The first example of someone making a big change to the food industry was when Upton Sinclair wrote his novel The Jungle. It was intended to expose the unethical working conditions of the meatpacking industry, but instead the public focused on the unsanitary conditions that their meat was packed in. Because of public outrage, the government was forced to create regulations about the production of food and the processing of food. While not the intended effect, the novel still did some good. The overall way that food was produced was not changed, though. People did not realize the damage that their systems were doing until the Dust Bowl during the 1930s. The over-farming and tilling of crops had sucked all of the nutrients out of the soil. All of the farms and the prairies were left high and dry. Coupled with the Great Depression, this period destroyed families. This quickly taught farmers that their practices needed to change. Then World War II began. Thousands of soldiers were being sent into war zones with no place to buy fresh food. The government had to come up with a way to sustain the troops. They engineered foods that were processed and could be easily transported. Thus was the beginning of convenience foods in America. This was a kitchen evolution that involved a lot of plastic. Then along came the Green Revolution. Pesticides and fertilizers became common practice. Single crop farming spread. Every farm began using heavy machinery. Scientists figured out how to genetically engineer plants to have more nutrients and grow more efficiently. This was a new era of agriculture. While some regulations have been made, modern-day agriculture is still mostly similar to how it was made to be during the Green Revolution. While you can see how much the industry has evolved over time, there is still much change that needs to be made. The food system consists of four main parts: producers, processing, distributing, and consumption. The producers are the farmers. They grow crops and raise animals for food. This part requires gallons of water and acres of land in order to happen, especially when it comes to animal products. The next step is processing. In this step, they are cleaned, stored, and packaged. This is when a lot of food is drastically altered to the form that you see in grocery stores. This is how the sausage gets made. This processing step requires large machinery and allows for corporations to gain monopolies. The third step is distributing. This is the transportation part of the process. It can be moved by plane, train, boat, or automobile. The food is sent to grocery stores, restaurants, schools, and many other places. Food is transported all over the country for these purposes. The final step of the process is consumption. This is when the food is purchased and eaten. This group is the largest and also has the ability to make the most change. You fall under this category. Much of the carbon emissions in the world come from the food industry. 3/4 of food emissions come from the system of production itself. Livestock contributes a lot to this, especially cows. Cows produce methane, which is 28 times as destructive to the atmosphere as carbon. Cows also consume 20 gallons of water a day. Additionally, out of all free-range animals, the area that cows need to graze is the largest out of all livestock. Nearly 20% of carbon emissions from the food system comes from transportation. Food is moved all over the country to make sure consumers can have all the options they want. All of the fuel needed to move it around produces a lot of carbon that is put out into the atmosphere. Overall, the entire system puts out a large amount of greenhouse gases into the air, much more than the trees in the world can handle. 1/3 of all food in the world goes to waste. All of the resources and energy put into this food is just completely wasted. 108 billion pounds of food are discarded every year in the United States alone. 39% of this, or about 42 billion pounds, comes from homes. This is because of a culture that encourages overconsumption. The unfortunate effects of this are that more food is produced than is actually consumed due to the high demand. Once the food is thrown away, it is sent to the landfill. It does break down, but it does so by rotting. All of the rotting food in the landfills produces methane. If this food waste was eliminated, global greenhouse gases would be reduced by up to 8%. This number sounds small, but it is actually a large difference. All of this food waste also creates an ethical dilemma because the 108 billion pounds of food is the equivalent of about 130 billion meals. A large part of this food is perfectly fine and could have been given to people who could not afford 3 meals a day, especially all of the food from grocery stores that is just thrown away at the end of the day. The United States needs to learn how to control its food waste problem. On a global scale, food production is damaging all aspects of the environment. One of the main areas being destroyed is the ocean. Overfishing has been a serious issue for decades. While regulations have been passed to protect the fish in recent years, the populations are still tiny and may never fully recover. The situation is much more dire than many people are aware of. Outside of the ocean, animals being bred for food are also treated poorly. Because of the highly commercialized food systems, animals are seen as production units, not living beings. The priority of companies is to maximize efficiency and profits, not the well-being of the livestock. The habitats of animals that aren't even being used for food are also being destroyed. Deforestation is being used to make space for agriculture. The animals living in these habitats are forced to find new homes, so they either have to adapt to a new environment or die. This is leading to so many endangered and extinct animals. I understand that there are several counter-arguments to my thesis. One is that there are many other things that contribute to climate change. Agriculture only contributes to 11% of the problem. The majority of carbon emissions come from other sources. For example, electricity contributes to 30% of carbon emissions. The argument here is that there are bigger contributors that people should focus on. While these are valid opinions, there is change being made to energy. There have been recent breakthroughs in nuclear energy, which is sustainable and carbon neutral. Additionally, the food system still contributes a large amount to global carbon emissions, and decreasing those will still make a big difference to the environment. Another counter-argument people may think about is that climate change is not the fault of consumers. Only 100 companies are responsible for 71% of carbon emissions in the world. If we aren't the main cause of the problem, why should we have to do anything about it? I mean, the idea of a personal carbon footprint was created by ExxonMobil to make people stop paying attention to the damage the International Oil Corporation was doing. While this is an important thing to note, it is also true that companies are influenced by consumers. Consumers' changing habits will force these major corporations to change their ways so that they can continue to make money. A third counter-argument that is often mentioned is that becoming environmentally conscious can be a tough transition for companies. Because of public concern, many companies have started to make the transition, but it is quite challenging. It is a major economic burden, and some popular products cannot be made to be environmentally friendly. Many smaller businesses cannot afford to make the change. Additionally, many large companies have existed for a long time. It is not necessarily feasible to change their ways in such a short span of time. While I understand this, it is also important to recognize that every change can make a difference. Companies should try to make as many changes as is feasible, even if it's very slowly. There are many changes that you can make in your everyday life to help combat these issues that the food production system has caused. A major one is dietary change. While switching to an entirely plant-based diet is ideal, just eating less meat in general helps a lot. Even just cutting red meat entirely out of your diet will make a big difference. Another big difference you can make is to try to buy from localized food systems. This means buy from farmers markets and local businesses instead of major grocery store chains. This decreases the transportation emissions and generally ensures that the practices used to produce the food were ethical. Outside of personal changes, it is also important to spread awareness. Talking to other people about these issues will make sure that more people will make changes and therefore they will have a bigger impact. This is how we change the system. Everyone needs to work together in order to make a difference. In conclusion, while it may feel like you're not making a difference, Every choice you make to be considerate towards the environment counts for something. The planet is in trouble, and we need to work as a collective to do something about it. If you want to learn more about this serious issue, there are additional resources linked in the description below. Thank you for your time.